It's no secret that every Republican president of my lifetime, and even before, has had an impeachment attempt launched against him. The crime, of course, is being elected as a Republican, and while there's always another crime that they manage to cite, given the fact that it happens over and over again, we can only conclude that the crime is actually running as a Republican. If we want further evidence, I can cite the fact from memory that on election night 2016, before I ever started my channel, I was Googling something else entirely, but the first result auto-completed when I said how to into how to impeach the president. 2 months before Donald Trump would ever take the oath of office, and 2 months before he could ever conceivably commit a crime in office. However, one last thing that I do want to cite on this point is the fact that while every Republican president of my lifetime and even before has had an impeachment inquiry brought against him, the only presidents that have actually been impeached have been Democrats. Now, this has been an incredibly hard video to write because the story changes so fast. I am actually recording this on Friday morning, but by Friday evening when I post this video, the story's already going to have changed, but sometimes you just have to hit that record button and hope for the best. As of Friday morning, I don't even know if the impeachment inquiry is still on at this point, or if it's something that was just talked about in order to throw red meat to the base of the Democrat Party. But we will start from the beginning. A couple weeks ago, late in the week, it was revealed that a mysterious whistleblower had come forward and was speaking with the House members about a phone call with a foreign leader. Now, one other interesting side note that I noticed while we were going through this entire situation is that it's a heroic whistleblower when the media dislikes the victim, and an evil hacker when they like the victim. But the story fell to the wayside as we continued to talk about the impeachment of Kavanaugh instead, then the situation with Iran and Saudi Arabia. But we quickly got the attention back last Friday when it was revealed that the call was to Ukrainian President Zelensky. At the time, it was assumed that the whistleblower had inside knowledge of the call. As we all know, Twitter then became a frenzy of impeachment fever, and most of your right-leaning commentators, like Styx, pointed out that these calls always have 2 or 3 people listening in on them for security, so if there was something to know about the call, we would have already known about it. But Styx may have been the first one to say, release the full transcript of the call. After the climate summit and during one of the best speeches Trump has given in his presidency, Nancy Pelosi gave a speech of her own. In it, she outlined the fact that we are in an official impeachment inquiry. Now, the important thing to bear in mind is that we are not at impeachment yet. What Nancy Pelosi has done at this point is to unite 6 House committees that are semi-autonomous under her own rule and direct them to try and find charges that they can present to the Senate for a trial for impeachment to go through. And the other important note that we need to keep in mind is that at the time of the speech, there was no official record of the decision. Now, one of the first things that I did when it came to my attention that this wasn't any sort of official business and there was no record of it was I took an archive of the minutes from the House of Representatives for September 24th when Nancy Pelosi made her speech. And doing a quick scroll through there, you can see that they passed a few resolutions throughout the day, but none of them had anything to do with the impeachment of the president, or at least changing the committee assignments into a formal impeachment inquiry. I have linked this archive in the description below, so make sure you go over there and check this out for yourself. Now, when I say that this story changes by the hour, I'm not kidding, because very early the very next morning, Trump took the advice of many in the commentary universe. That morning, a transcript of the call in question was released unredacted to the American people. Now, of course, it's been pointed out that it was not a word-for-word transcript of the call. In fact, it was a memo that was taken from notes that were taken by people that were listening in on the call. As I mentioned before, people are always doing. but there is enough information in here that we can at least reasonably draw a conclusion as to what happened in the call. As most people have said, this has been one of the most politicized documents we've seen since the Mueller report, and it seems that both sides of the impeachment argument could see exactly what they needed out of this document. Now, I personally read this document for myself, and while it does not make our president look the greatest, I don't see anything impeachable in this document at all. I see a couple of narcissistic leaders of world countries that are sitting on the phone rubbing each other's backs, but apparently the people on the impeachment side of the argument could find damnable evidence in the document. Now, let's take a second and go back and look at the House of Representatives again, because Nancy Pelosi kind of played herself a little bit in this situation. Right now, she has no real choice except to go through with the impeachment that she's been avoiding ever since she became the Speaker of the House again. And the votes are there to get the statistic and say that Donald Trump is an impeached president, but the Senate will stop it with an acquittal. I'll touch on that in just a bit, but there's little else that she can do at this point. The base is excited for the removal, and to pull it back off the table would be political suicide, and while Nancy Pelosi is at the end of her career, she does still have to go back home and face her constituents. Now, there's a little bit of tinfoil that we do have to cover when we're covering a story like this, and given the fact that the whistleblower was anonymous, a lot of people in the beginning have theorized that he or she was a plant by Donald Trump, or Donald Trump himself, to try and get the attention out there and try and get this impeachment inquiry going. It's easy to see why he might do that. The talk of impeachment, especially now that it's getting serious, has already served to harden the president's base, and the idea is generally unpopular among the moderates in the middle of the country. While I have a hard time associating that kind of strategy to one person, especially President Donald Trump, this whole thing does seem very convenient, and it does seem very beneficial to the president. I would have an easier time, though, associating a conspiracy with a much larger group. Now, since all of this has happened, I have been on two other web shows, The Generational Gap and Beauty in the Beta, and I have said the same thing regarding this situation on both shows, and I look at this in a more objective sense, especially given the facts we have in front of us. President Trump is statistically in a very good place to win in 2020. While we do still have a presence in the Middle East, and we are a little bit wary about what's going on with Iran and Saudi Arabia right now, as of this moment we have no new wars during the Trump administration. We've got an incredibly good economy. We've got the tax cuts that have fueled this incredibly good economy. And for the most part, we have more individual liberty, except for the vaping ban and the bump stock ban. The group that is running for president only strengthens his chances. Of course, the Democrats can talk a big game about how Trump is not electable, but they know that they have a hard road ahead of them for the presidency. Now, I look at the situation and I look at the inquiry, and all that I see is a play for the Senate. Whether Democrats flip the Oval Office or not, the Senate is a key to a lot of the plans that they have for this country, including the Supreme Court. But it's also a hard road for them to try and take the majority in the Senate, given the people that are up for re-election this time around and the states that they represent. So, much like my theory about Kennedy and Kavanaugh and the events that followed during that Supreme Court nomination, I feel like this is a political event that is meant to be an advertisement to drive out the vote and try and flip all of these Senate seats, whether they're vulnerable or not. An impeachment inquiry would take months before the House could conceivably get to a point where they could hold a reasonable vote to try and bring charges over to the Senate, and that would land us right in the climax of election season, when some of the worst political ads are coming out, and the Congresspeople, both in the Senate and the House, are trying desperately to flip those last voters or try and get more people out to give that last vote. I don't see a serious attempt to remove a sitting president. All that I see is a serious attempt to try and flip another chamber of Congress. and an expensive one at that. What do you think about the fact that we have an impeachment inquiry going? Did you read the transcript, and what did you think about the call? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.
You're always